Hi again, everyone. This is Mr. K on Sports. Today, I am going to go through and review the 2021 NFL Draft. Now, once again, let me repeat, I do not give grades to the NFL Draft the day or two after it's concluded. Again, 3 to 5 years is what it takes to really evaluate a draft, and I think it's foolish if you try. What I'm going to simply do is go through each team and highlight the picks and some of the things that I felt were traits of the draft that are worth sharing. So I'm going to go by division. I'll start with the AFC Eastern Division and the Buffalo Bills. And the Bills, they were very balanced with their draft. They drafted 4 players from offense, 4 from defense, but I noticed 3 of their 4 offensive selections were for the offensive line. Of course, that is to protect the prize, the franchise, Josh Allen, their quarterback. On round 1, they took Greg Rousseau, an edge rusher from Miami of Florida, to try to beef up their pass rush. And then their 2 sixth-round choices I thought were interesting, both defensive backs. Damar Hamlin, the safety from Pitt, and Rashad Wildgoose, the corner from Wisconsin. Both guys projected to go a little higher than they did. So I think they got some good value with those 2 DBs in the 6th round, if not for starting purposes and definitely coming in on nickel or dime packages or even contributing on special teams. Miami Dolphins, they drafted really to try to give more weapons to their quarterback, a rookie from last year, Tua, and 5 out of the 7 players there they drafted were on offense. Jalen Waddle, the number 1 draft choice, the wide receiver from Alabama. They picked a pair of Jalen's, actually. They had 2 first-round picks. Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher from Miami to Florida, was taken later in round 1. So they addressed by some needs there by getting big play guys for both offense and defense. 2nd-round choice, Liam Eichenberg, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame, the Cleveland St. Ignatius grad. Again, the design there to give Tua some protection on the offensive line. And round 3 choice, Hunter Long, the tight end from Boston College. I thought that was interesting because they already have Mike Gesicki, the former Penn State tight end. But again, I think this is a move to give Tua more weapons, both in the passing game and to protect him as well on the blocking end. The New England Patriots, they were, again, balanced, 4 offense and 4 defense as far as their selections. Number 1 draft choice was Mac Jones, the quarterback from Alabama, who slid a bit, was lower than was projected, and fell right into the lap of Bill Belichick. So I'm sure he was happy to grab him at 15. Their 2nd-round draft choice, again, another Alabama guy, Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle, another guy that slid farther than anticipated. Their 3rd-round choice and their 4th-round choice were both from Oklahoma. On the 3rd round, they took Ronnie Perkins, the edge rusher, and in the 4th round, De'Mondre Stevenson, who's a tank of a running back. And again, I would look for him to move in on that rotation. You never know from one week to the next who Bill Belichick's going to feature in the backfield. Stevenson looks like a guy that could get a lot of short yardage and goal line carries, so pay attention, fantasy owners. Finally, the New York Jets, rounding out the AFC East. The Jets had a lot of draft choices. They had a lot of capital. Their first 4 choices were on offense. Their last 6 were on defense. They took 5 defensive backs in a row at one point. Their number 1 draft choice was Zach Wilson, the quarterback from BYU, as expected. They also took later in round 1 some protection for him in the form of guard Elijah Vera Tucker from USC. On the 2nd round, they took Elijah Moore, a wide receiver from Ole Miss, to give Zach Wilson a weapon there. Round 4 and round 5, they took back-to-back guys named Michael Carter. In round 4, it was Michael Carter, the running back from North Carolina. Look for him to be a 3rd down type back to catch a lot of passes. And in the 5th round, Michael Carter II, a corner from Duke. Moving to the AFC North, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their first 4 choices were on offense. Their next 4 were on defense. And their final choice was, of all things, a punter. The Steelers started out, as most people expected, taking Najee Harris, the running back from Alabama, with their number 1 choice. They followed that with, again, another offensive weapon, a 2nd-round pick, Pat Fryermuth, the tight end from Penn State, who's regarded as an all-around player, good blocker, good receiver. So indirectly, they've protected Big Ben with a big back and a good blocking tight end. Then they went for offensive line help in rounds 3 and 4. In round 3, they took Kendrick Green, the center guard from Illinois. He played more guard in college, but I think the Steelers are projecting him to be their next center. And on round 4, it was Dan Moore Jr., the big tackle from Texas A&M. Finally, on round 7 was an interesting pick. Presley Harvin III, a 260-pound punter from Georgia Tech. It'll be interesting. Obviously, they regard him highly. Be interesting if he ends up being the regular punter for the Steelers this year. Using a 7th-round draft choice for him, I would assume so. The Baltimore Ravens, also balanced, took 4 offense and 4 defense as far as their choices. First-round pick was Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver from Minnesota, looking to get another weapon for Mr. Jackson, their quarterback. And also in round 1, a little later, they took Odafe Oweh, the edge rusher from Penn State. Then slide down to round 4, another wide receiver for Lamar Jackson, Tylan Wallace, the wide receiver from Oklahoma State. And then they finished up a little later in the draft, a couple of interesting 5th-round choices for the Ravens. Shaun Wade, the corner from Ohio State, who fell a bit in the draft, having a weaker senior year than anticipated. And Ben Mason, a pure fullback from Michigan, to give yet another blocker for Lamar Jackson and company. The Cleveland Browns, they really concentrated more on defense in their draft because that was their bigger need. 5 of the 8 draft choices were on defense, including their number 1 choice, Greg Newsome, the consistent corner from Northwestern. On round 2, they took a guy who slipped, and they were happy to get him, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. They just call him JOK for short. He is the tweener linebacker from Notre Dame. And if the Browns can figure out how to use him correctly, he may be a steal at round 2. Round 3 was Anthony Schwartz, a speedy wide receiver from Auburn. He's more of a project. He'll take some time, but you can't teach speed. And in round 4, James Hudson, a tackle who is projected to go higher, Hudson from Cincinnati, lands with the Browns. Finally, the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals took 5 players on offense and 4 on defense, and they also drafted a kicker. The Bengals started out by taking Jamar Chase, the wide receiver from LSU. He'll reunite with his former teammate. Of course, that is quarterback Joe Burrow. Interesting that the Bengals went with a wide receiver rather than offensive line help. But then they turned around in the 2nd round and did go offensive line. Jackson Carman, the guard from Clemson. Round 4, they also went offensive line. DeAndre Smith, a big tackle from Eastern Carolina. Round 5 was that kicker, Evan McPherson, the kicker from Florida. And in round 6, they went yet another offensive lineman, so they did address the position 3 times in the draft. Trey Hill, center from Georgia. The AFC South, interesting teams here. The Tennessee Titans, really disappointed on defense last year. They spent 5 of 8 draft choices on the defensive side of the football. They went with Caleb Farley. They rolled the dice on the corner from Virginia Tech. Of course, Farley had some medical issues going into the draft. Some teams shied away from him. Dylan Radunz, the tackle from North Dakota State, was taken in round 2. And slide down to round 6, one of my favorite players of the draft, Brady Breeze, a safety from Oregon. Scrappy player, will definitely help on special teams. He may even be an overachiever that ends up starting at safety for the Titans. The Indianapolis Colts, they had 4 choices that they selected offensive players and 3 on the defensive side. They started out with Kwity Paye, the edge rusher from Michigan, in the 1st round. In the 4th round, they took Kylan Granson, the tight end from SMU. And in round 6, an interesting choice, Sam Ehlinger, the quarterback. Ehlinger is from Texas, and they look to add depth behind that position from newly acquired Carson Wentz. And finally, in round 7, beefing up the offensive line, the Colts selected Will Fries, the guard from Penn State. The Houston Texans, a downtrodden group right now, with all the situation that's going on in the offseason with the Texans, with the coaching change, and then, of course, Mr. Watson, a quarterback, getting into hot water. They didn't have much draft capital. 3 offensive and 2 defensive players were selected. They did not have a first-round choice. They didn't even have a second-round choice. So in the 3rd round, they took a quarterback. Davis Mills, the quarterback from Stanford. We'll see if he ends up having to play since Deshaun Watson's status is uncertain. Also in round 3, they took a wide receiver, Nico Collins out of Michigan. And in round 5, a tight end. His name's Brevin Jordan from Miami of Florida. And finally, the Jacksonville Jaguars, with their new coach, Urban Meyer, they had a large draft class, 5 offensive and 4 defensive players. Of course, they had the number 1 overall choice in Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback from Clemson. They followed that up later in round 1 by taking his teammate, Travis Etienne, the running back from Clemson. So that should be a dynamic duo for many years for Urban Meyer. And on round 2, they went to defense, Tyson Campbell, highly regarded corner from Georgia. And in round 5, Urban took one of his old Ohio State players, Luke Farrell, a tight end. Finally, in the AFC Western Division, the Kansas City Chiefs only had 6 draft choices, but they decided to spend 4 of them on the offensive side of the football. They went with, in round 2, they didn't have a first-round choice. They traded that. They had Nick Bolton, the linebacker from nearby Missouri. Also in round 2, Creed Humphrey, the center from Oklahoma. And to further beef up the offensive line, which was a need area for the Chiefs, in round 6, they took Trey Smith, a guard from Tennessee. The Las Vegas Raiders, they really concentrated on defense. Their defense was porous last year, 5 of their 7 choices. On round 1, though, was probably the biggest surprise of the first round. Alex Leatherwood, the tackle from Alabama, who was not projected to go in the first round. Well, John Gruden, Mike Mayock decided to go against the grain again and made that their choice. Round 2, they took Trevin Moehrig, the highly regarded safety from TCU. Slide down to round 3, an interesting choice, Malcolm Kuntz, an edge rusher from Buffalo. And then on round 7, a sleeper pick, who may end up helping them greatly, Jimmy Morrissey, the center from Pitt. The Denver Broncos had many choices, 10 draft choices. They decided 7 of them would be on the defensive side of the ball. They started out in round 1 on defense with Patrick Surtain, the 3rd, the highly regarded corner from Alabama. Bit of a surprise, but the Broncos decided not to draft a quarterback since they traded for backup Teddy Bridgewater. On round 2, Javonte Williams, the running back from North Carolina, another highly regarded player. So the first 2 choices for the Broncos look pretty good. Round 3, interesting choice, Quinn Meinerz, the center from Division III, Wisconsin Whitewater. Be interesting to follow his progress. And in round 6, they took a boomer bust type choice. Seth Williams, the wide receiver from Auburn, tall player, plagued by drops in college, makes big plays. We'll see if he can gain consistency with the Broncos. And finally, in the AFC West, the Los Angeles Chargers. They quietly had a good draft, what appears to be a good draft. 5 offensive and 4 defensive players. They took Rashawn Slater, the big tackle from Northwestern, in the first round to try to gain some more support for their rookie quarterback last year, Justin Herbert. Round 2, they took Asante Samuel Jr., a very good corner from Florida State. Round 3, Trey McKitty, a very tough tight end from Georgia. And in round 4, Chris Rumph II, he's an edge rusher from Duke. All players that were pretty highly regarded coming into the draft. Now let's switch the page to the NFC. The NFC East, the Washington football team. They made 5 choices on the offensive side of the ball, 4 on defense, and 1 long snapper. They started out with Jamin Davis, the linebacker from Kentucky, solid choice. A slide down to round 3 to gain a weapon on offense. They took De'Ami Brown, the wide receiver from North Carolina. Round 4, another weapon added to the offensive side of the football, John Bates, an interesting tight end prospect from Boise State. Cameron Cheeseman was the long snapper. He went in round 6. He's from Michigan. And in round 7, a guy I like, they took edge rusher from Penn State, Shaka Toney. He'll need to beef up a little bit in the weight room, but could be a steal on round 7. The Dallas Cowboys really went heavy on defense. Their defense was as porous as it had been in many years last year. They took 8 out of 11 draft choices on defense, including the first 6. They started out with Micah Parsons, the all-star linebacker from Penn State. Kelvin Joseph, the corner from Kentucky, went in the second round. Jabril Cox, the guy who slid a bit, fourth round linebacker from LSU. And also in the fourth round, they took an interesting big offensive tackle prospect, Josh Ball from Marshall. The New York Giants concentrated on defense. 4 of their 6 choices were on that side of the ball. They started out, though, on offense in round 1. Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver from Florida, to try to add a weapon for quarterback Daniel Jones. On round 2 was Azeez Ojulari, the edge rusher from Georgia, who slid a little bit, so good value there. Round 4, Ellerson G. Smith, the edge rusher from Northern Iowa, an interesting athlete. And the Philadelphia Eagles also concentrated on defense, 6 of their 9 choices. However, first-round draft choice, Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith, the wide receiver from Alabama, was the choice. They followed that up with his teammate in the second round, Landon Dickerson, the center. In the fourth round, an interesting choice, Zach McPherson, a corner from Texas Tech. And in the 7th round, again, I think a real good value here, could be a real sleeper pick, Patrick Johnson, another edge rusher from Tulane. In the NFC North, the Green Bay Packers, all their controversy before the draft swirled around their quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who wants to be traded. Despite that, they went with 5 out of their 9 selections on defense, including their number 1 draft choice, Eric Stokes, the corner from Georgia. Their second-round choice was to gain some protection for Rodgers. They went with Josh Myers, the center from Ohio State. And finally, in round 3, Amari Rodgers, a wide receiver from Clemson, finally adding a weapon for Aaron Rodgers. On round 6, a guy that I think is a steal, Isaiah McDuffie, the speedy linebacker from Boston College. And on round 7, an interesting running back, Kylan Hill from Mississippi State. The Chicago Bears, they went on the offensive side of the ball for the majority of their picks, 5 of their 7, including their first 5 in a row. Starting with the pick that they traded up for, their number 1 draft choice, Justin Fields, the quarterback from Ohio State. Round 2, they went with Tevin Jenkins, the big tackle from Oklahoma State, who fell a little bit. Good value there to protect their new quarterback. And on round 6, a weapon, Daz Newsome, a wide receiver from North Carolina to keep an eye on. The Minnesota Vikings, they had a lot of draft capital, 6 offensive and 5 defensive players in all. Christian Darrisaw was a tackle from Virginia Tech, the number 1 draft choice, good-looking prospect. Interesting, in round 3, they went with Kellen Mond, the quarterback from Texas A&M, maybe to groom as a replacement eventually for Kirk Cousins. Round 3, they went with Chaz Surratt, a linebacker from North Carolina who could pay big dividends. They actually had 4 third-round picks. One of their other third-round picks was Patrick Jones, an interesting edge rusher from Pitt. And finally, the Detroit Lions, they had 7 choices, 3 on offense, 4 on defense. They started out with a very consistent player on round 1, Penei Sewell, the big tackle from Oregon. On round 3, bear with me on this name, the big corner from Syracuse, Ifeatu Melifonwu. He is a guy that could pay dividends there up at the Dome in Detroit. And finally, in round 4, a wide receiver who looks very good, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's out of USC. So some interesting draft choices for the Lions as they try to turn it around. In the NFC South, the world champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers had 7 choices, 3 offensive, 4 defensive. They started out with Joe Tryon, the edge rusher from Washington, highly regarded prospect. Round 2 was interesting. Kyle Trask, quarterback, Florida, maybe the heir apparent for Tom Brady. And on round 4, Jalen Darden, the diminutive wide receiver from North Texas, as another weapon for TB12. The New Orleans Saints, they had 3 offensive and 3 defensive choices. The first 3 all on defense, looking to beef that side of the ball up with Peyton Turner, the defensive end from Houston. Now, round 2 was Pete Werner, very consistent linebacker from Ohio State. And in round 4, an interesting choice, Ian Book, the quarterback from Notre Dame. Looked to be more of a backup type, but who knows? If Sean Payton can get the most of the guy, you never know. He could end up being a starter someday. The Atlanta Falcons, they had 4 offensive and 5 defensive choices in the draft. Kyle Pitts, the big tight end from Florida, the #1 draft choice and maybe best player in the whole draft. The Falcons also got Richie Grant, a safety from UCF, in the 2nd round, and Drew Dahlman, a center from Stanford, in the 4th round, whose dad played in the NFL. The Carolina Panthers, a lot of draft capital, 6 offensive players, 4 defensive, and they also drafted a long snapper. The Panthers went with J.C. Horn, very highly regarded corner from South Carolina, as their #1 draft choice. They followed that up with a good-looking wide receiver in round 2, Terrace Marshall Jr. from LSU. In round 3, they went with Tommy Treble, a promising tight end from Notre Dame. And in round 4, Chuba Hubbard, the running back from Oklahoma State, who had a super year where he gained over 2,000 yards 2 years ago in 2019. And finally, that long snapper that I spoke of in the 6th round was Thomas Fletcher from none other than Alabama. And finally, the NFC West, the Seattle Seahawks. Very few draft choices, only 3 of them. They picked 2 offensive players and 1 defensive player. They started out with Dwayne Eskridge. Eskridge is a wide receiver from Western Michigan, and they followed that with a 4th round choice, Trey Brown, the corner from Oklahoma. The Los Angeles Rams, 4 offensive and 5 defensive choices. They did not have a #1 choice. They used their #2 choice on Tutu Atwell, the wide receiver from Louisville. In round 4, they had an interesting corner by the name of Robert Rochelle from Central Arkansas. And in round 7, maybe a sleeper pick, a wide receiver from Notre Dame named Ben Skowronek. The Arizona Cardinals concentrated on defense, 5 of their 7 selections. #1 choice, very good-looking linebacker, Zaven Collins from Tulsa. In round 2, they took Rondale Moore, the small little shifty slot receiver from Purdue. Round 4, good-looking corner, Marco Wilson from Florida, so some good value there. And then even better value in round 6, Tay Gowan, another corner from UCF. And then round 7, again, a solid lineman, a center from Penn State, Michael Menet. And finally, the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners had 8 selections, 5 on offense. They took Trey Lance, the quarterback, at #3 overall from North Dakota State. A little bit surprising because it had been publicized that they were going to go with Mac Jones. But Trey Lance was the choice there as San Francisco's quarterback of the future. In round 2, they took Aaron Banks, a big guard from Notre Dame, to protect them. And in round 3, Trace Sermon, the running back who came on real well late in the year for Ohio State. So interesting picks all around for all the NFL teams. Only time will tell who did the best. But I just wanted to highlight on some of my impressions on some of the guys that really could be helping NFL teams this fall. Till next time, this is Mr. K signing off. Thanks for listening.